welcome to Mindshock. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, here with the one and only Professor Jay Smith to continue our epistemological discussions on various topics. Today, we are tackling the alleged moon transmissions, how they filmed, what they filmed, how they transmitted back to the Earth, allegedly, and why they can't do it again in 2024. Bizarre things. As always, if you want to help support the podcast, help logic and reason return to a world where it is quickly going extinct, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. If they're not coming through, just like and comment on more videos. That's how the YouTube algorithm works. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Like and share Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So, Professor Jay, how have you been? Are you excited to be back?
Yes, no, I'm ready to tackle some more issues here, and yeah, it's a powerful day in the sense that the whole supposed moon hoax is now settled, since it seems that we're back. We're back, baby.
Yeah, let's jump right into it. All right.
The moon landing, I've been shocked because I finally, in this last year or so, managed to figure out that the moon landing was suspect, and then all of a sudden, in one fell swoop, it seems like we really did go to the moon with that Odysseus landing. It's over. That's the joke I wanted to make.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hardly even looked at the Odysseus thing. I mean, I saw a little bit. It's so, yeah.
Now that you've mentioned that it's all been put to bed, it seems 2024 is the year. Who needs video? Who needs photos? I mean, The report should suffice, shouldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we landed, and it's been, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, this is our first landing of any kind of equipment or anything since the early 70s. Is this correct?
I mean, the U.S. supposedly, yeah. I don't know how you feel about China's landing. The footage looked unconvincing to me, but I don't know. Maybe it met your threshold.
Well, Americans certainly did. No, I just actually saw some footage. I was at another, because I've been enjoying checking out some Austin Whitsitt, and I saw these videos. I had never seen the Chinese moon landings before, and they look ridiculous. I mean,
well, hold on. Let's not appeal to incredulity. Maybe there are some kind of interdimensional rifts on the moon that are affecting the whatever radiation that's warping the video footage to make it look like that. It might still be all on the up and up.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, the unique nature of that radiation coming off the moon might be particularly targeted at Chinese technology or something.
Yeah.
So it may be the reason that their Earth actually looks flat. I mean, it doesn't even really look.
Well, especially if they cheaped out on their components, because if they're mass producing all of their space equipment like they do with toys or all the other equipment, perhaps it's not properly shielded for all of these as of yet undiscovered interdimensional rifts on the moon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you definitely are not going to survive those interdimensional rifts, with cheap Chinese equipment.
Yeah. I mean, we should be thanking our lucky stars they managed to get any footage at all, because, I mean, apparently NASA can't anymore. I mean, apparently they're able to, I don't know if you know this, but the reason we're able to have high definition moon footage from the Apollo missions is because they were actually recorded in high definition in the 60s. High definition, which didn't come out on the consumer market until, let me get the year right, because I want to be as accurate as possible here.
Certainly, if I were to guess, it's at least 90s for
So
high def.
actually, let's
But
see what Merriam-Webster actually. Wow. You know what's wild? Merriam-Webster says that the first, well, I guess the first known use of the words high definition was in 1981. It doesn't say in reference to what. Like not video, maybe not video, I don't know. But that's
well,
kind of curious because the the first, according to Webster, high definition itself was not a phrase until 1981.
huh? Yeah, that is
But
interesting.
let's,
That's
yeah, let's see the actual first broadcast. I want to say 2000s, but it might. Okay, so high definition videos, for those that
well,
don't know, the resolution is 1920 by 1080, which obviously far in excess. Now, here's what's wild. So I mean, I don't know if we should do a whole history lesson on how many lines of resolution there are, but bear with me here. So 1920 by 1080 is high def. Now, standard definition is considered 480. So the first electronic scanning format was 405 lines. So
mm,
from 1939, Europe and the US tried 605 and 441 lines. In 1941, the FCC mandated 525 for the US. In wartime France, Rene Bartholomew tested high res up to 1,042 lines. That is curious. In late
yeah,
49, I actually didn't know that. In late 49, official French transmission. Wow, this is actually wild. In late 49, official French transmissions began with 819 lines, which is, I mean, that's pretty good. That's more than double the standard. However, this standard was abandoned for 625. So, I mean, call me crazy.
and
How many times in history do we see far better technology being abandoned for inferior technology? For example, the tire, the car tire, the first tire developed was one that either didn't, that couldn't be punctured or had a far lower puncture rate, but they didn't release that one. They released the one that was able to be punctured.
yeah, yeah. Again, there's just so many holes in our system because it seems like there's so many stories like that where the product that would be completely superior they won't let out. The light bulb seems like that's a classic
Oh yeah. Yeah.
example of that,
Not to
isn't it?
mention the electric car. I mean, they had electric cars. Actually, we probably should do a podcast just on the electric car. I don't remember the exact dates. I'm not sure if the electric car actually came out before the Model T or at the same
Oh,
time, but it was
well, that's
approximately the same time.
interesting.
Yeah.
I have a couple of stories associated with electric cars, uh, associated with my well, not from when I the work I was doing there, but it's affiliated with the national lab that I worked at, which I'm aware of. They were doing projects with electric cars, which it was actually with a private company that had the ingenuity to develop one, and basically the national lab I'm referring to partnered with that small company and then crushed it. Basically, they did electric cars, but then I actually have an electric car from that era that I
Oh
got from
wow.
someone that I knew. Yeah, well, have you ever heard of a Zap?
It does sound familiar.
It was like a greenish. They're kind of they're it was a greenish electric car, kind of from the early '90s, I think. Uh,
Are you familiar with the electric boat car plane? It was like a car, but it was also a boat, and it also had these wings that unfolded, so it was like a mini plane. That came out in the 70s. I
Oh
believe there
wow.
was an electric version of that as well.
Just either electric or fuel powered. That would be a you definitely feel like James Bond in that particular
Yeah, there's a
vehicle.
video of, I think they might have just done prototypes. I don't think it was ever mass produced, or if so, in extremely limited numbers, so not really mass produced. But there were a couple of prototypes, and the videos were so cool. As far as I know, there weren't any accidents or anything with them. It was,
Hmm.
and they were priced on the high side, but not more expensive than like a Ferrari.
Huh. Well, I've realized. I mean, I'm not an expert by any stretch in like the nature of the electric car, but and again, I don't know what all Elon Musk is up to, or with the. By the way, isn't it seem almost insulting that the name of that car is Tesla? I mean, does that strike you as
Yes, and now you've confirmed that we need to do a dedicated electric car podcast just based on that. But yes,
well?
there's
Okay,
so
because I
much.
was
Yeah.
I was going to inject that I mean I feel like I'm only aware of the fringes of it, but keeping electric cars or that keeping that technology from becoming mass produced until now with Elon Musk, I think there's a lot of
Well,
conspiracies around
let's
it,
let's
isn't
be
there?
accurate. Elon Musk did not found Tesla or SpaceX. He just brought money in after it was already founded.
Okay.
So I again, for the people that give Elon Musk credit, I want to be very precise here. Elon Musk did not found any of those companies. They
No, I
already existed.
yeah, it seems like it's becoming increasingly evident that he's just a mouthpiece for
Oh, not
something.
only that, he's missed every deadline he ever gave. I mean, even his electric roof tiles completely, I mean, he promised those for incredibly cheap prices. Not only did it end up being four times more, but it wasn't even as efficient as everything else on the market. That was a total failure. Nobody wants to talk about that. They're just distracted that he bought Twitter. But anyway, we kind of got on a huge aside. Let's get back to the high def moon transmission. So,
Fair enough. Although, one last Elon Musk question:
okay.
have you heard anything? Because I just heard about this. There's like some sort of character. Again, I'm very on the periphery of a lot of this online stuff, but there's somebody who it's like possibly an AI Elon Musk that's talking that's been in some of these chats. Have you heard about this?
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay, we'll leave it, but you'll
Well, on the subject of Musk, we need to do a dedicated podcast on that because I don't know how much you know about him. Supposedly, allegedly, I am not claiming anything is true or untrue. This is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. Supposedly, allegedly, he comes from some blood diamond family, and his father's really connected into that world and possibly Illuminati connections as well. It seems like almost all these guys, none of them really came from nothing, like Bill Gates, Elon Musk. Steve Jobs is curious. I haven't done as big of a deep dive into him, but all these other guys that are kind of credited as these huge tech entrepreneurs with great minds, they were all bankrolled. None of them really came from nothing by the virtue of their own mind.
yeah. And I think I mentioned that before. It really irritates me that like this worship of these people,
Yeah,
and yet yeah, when you peek beneath the surface, or even one that sort of stunned me once was you know William Randolph Hearst, right?
yeah.
Uh, well, I had remembered from reading The Fountainhead that even though he's not a real likable character in it, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with that book, but Ayn Rand, she models one of the characters like
I'm
the
a fan.
second best
I'm a
one.
fan. I'm a fan of hers.
Yeah, I well, actually, we could talk about that too. I'm not. I whole history. Yeah, my parents were real active in the Libertarian Party. Actually, when I was a little kid, so I was getting exposed to things that it was way outside of the
Uh-oh.
normal
Well, then
politics.
you gotta be prepared for the mind shocker question, the listener questions, which are gonna include, are you an MK Ultra plant shill?
Oh, okay.
You know
Uh,
they're coming at some point. Those questions are gonna come.
Oh, okay. And well, okay, I'll start to prepare myself to divert attention since clearly I am.
Oh,
Uh
well, the first red
oh
flag
no,
is
I
that
revealed.
you didn't immediately deny it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So more suspicion than
All
well,
right, let's get focused here so this
all right,
doesn't
let's get
turn
focused.
into a
Oh, well,
JR type podcast.
um,
But
I was going to complain about William Randolph Hearst because Ayn Rand kind of presents her as as he bootstrapped himself up, and then come to find out later he's the son of George Hearst, that miner, that out of the 1800s.
well,
He
you know what's
what's that?
kind of weird though? A lot of these guys like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, I don't know if they were the ones who created that image that they built it all themselves. That was more the media. I don't remember, I haven't seen all the interviews, but I
No,
don't
no,
remember them specifically saying that they came from nothing.
no. I don't remember Bill Gates ever really referring to his background. Everyone kind of knows it a little bit, at least on the surface, but he too also has some of those fishy background things too, doesn't he? Or bloodlines type
Oh,
connections.
yeah. We touched upon that, I think, off air. But all right, let's get focused here.
All right,
So,
just but
uh,
Bill Gates
what?
really gets on my nerves. Okay, let's get focused.
Okay. So modern HD specs. I'm actually surprised because I thought that I would have been closer to the 90s. The early 1980s, Japanese engineers developed the high vision 1125 line interlaced TV standard, also called Muse. That's an interesting name. Medea, goddess of illusions. Muse is who inspire.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
very, very interesting. It
very
actually
creepy.
was, yeah, it was actually developed. Okay, the design effort started in 1979. So they started the design well after the moon landings, but somehow they not only had high def video, but they transmitted it live with almost no delay from the
Oh
moon to
yeah.
the. I mean, think about how wild this is. I mean, the coincidence theorists that just buy this, I mean, maybe they did. Maybe they had some top secret spec technology, but according to the reports, they listed every piece of equipment they had. It's not classified. They used some basic transmitters, and I think they were pointed the wrong way. If you
Yeah, yeah,
check,
I saw that too. And also, it seems, and again, these are things that if you don't investigate it, see, that's perhaps part of the discussion should be the psychology yet again. And most people that are so convinced that we went to the moon, they've just never looked, especially now, so many years after the
no, but
fact.
think about how ludicrous this is. If you set up a little transmitter at the top of a hill, it's not even going to make it down the hill if you point it the wrong way. But people are buying that they
No, no,
transmit high resolution video live from the
I
moon while pointing their tiny little transmitter the wrong direction.
exactly. No, I saw the same thing. And tiny is also the operative word. A, pointing the wrong direction, and then being like just a, I mean, it's just a little old thing that's supposed to be transmitting, as I recall. And I think you may have mentioned, I've heard this a few places, but some engineer had calculated, I mean, the size of what you would need to broadcast from the moon, supposedly at the distance that it is.
Yeah, it would have been a skyscraper.
Yeah, something massive.
And
And then they've got
not
this
only
little rinky
that,
dink.
not
Yeah.
only that, but even if it was a skyscraper, there would still be a massive delay, a massive, not to mention they would be dropping frames like crazy. I mean, I mean, even in modern YouTube streams, we get drops and glitches. I mean, they're going from the moon in high def. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
insane. But I am impressed with this Muse technology. So they started designing it in 1979. So over a decade after the alleged moon landings. And it
That's
could,
what the
but it was still impressive though, because it could deliver 1,125 lines, 60 field per second. So for those that don't know about interlaced and progressive scan, I'm not going to go into that, but it obviously the older tech it didn't have every single line scanned. It was alternate lines. But anyway, it was the early 80s when high vision was developed and it could run at 60 frames per second, which is cool because the first 60 frame per second broadcast, I believe, were in the 2000s. But continuing on here, the Sony HDVS system was presented at an international meeting of television engineers in Algiers, April 1981. That's an interesting place to have that.
I
Do we
was
need to
thinking
get
that
into an
too.
do we need to get into an occult angle here? So they're presenting this in Algiers, the largest city in Algeria. When was the last time a tech conference was held in Algeria? I mean, I'm just wondering.
No, no, that's exactly. I mean, and I didn't think of it as an occult angle, although who knows, there probably is. But yeah, I have never. I mean, especially something so cutting edge as what we're talking about. Japan, Germany, United States, Algiers.
Well,
So yeah,
do you
that
want to guess? Do you want to guess the other country they went to debut this?
to debut the technology.
Yeah,
So is it going to be another weird one like Algeria? Or?
Switzerland.
Oh,
I mean, this has Knights Templar written all over.
yeah, yeah, no, definitely.
We're not going to go down that rabbit hole for this podcast, but we probably should make a note to investigate the development of TV technology and why why there's an international meeting of television engineers in Algiers.
in Algiers in the 80s too, right?
Yeah, no, I mean it is a diplomatic country, but as far as like there is a lot of like political meetings there, but as far as I know, nothing to do with. I've never heard of like it being a tech hub. I mean,
No, I mean,
I'm doing a
especially
quick
because
I'm doing a quick scan on it now. Ottoman
well,
rule. I mean, I haven't seen it being a hub for tech
well, I think
conferences at all.
because this is 80s, right?
Yes.
Because also, yeah, it seemed like it was in huge tumult. Uh, I mean, I guess it was the 60s that had a vicious war for liberation against France, right? Algeria.
Let's see the years here.
I mean, they had a really brutal battle to try and get rid of France, which they're still trying to do, I guess. But so I would think in the 80s, I mean, of all those sort of northern African countries, uh,
19 from 1980 to 1962, from 1830 to 1962, Algeria had a relationship with France. But speaking of mud flood, the Algerian railway in the 1890s looks pretty spectacular. I'm just on
seriously,
the wiki. Their railway, like so this is horse
in
and buggy
Algeria,
here.
wow. Huh.
This is this is horse and buggy, and it looks spectacular. I mean, we're talking Greek columns, Roman arches, all these stone buildings. Meanwhile, there's literal horses in the foreground.
Yeah, everything you expect from Algeria.
Yeah. So
Uh,
there was the French invasion in 1830, and
dude,
then during the 30s, there was the complete redesign allegedly. And World War II, Algiers was the first city to be seized from the Axis by the Allies in Operation Terminal.
hmm.
1962, after a bloody independence struggle in which hundreds of thousands died. Wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
350,000 to 1.5 million people died.
that's what I'm talking about. It
Yeah.
no, I've looked in books on the subject, and yeah, I mean, there's been so many of those, but it was an especially bloody
Yeah,
effort,
that was 54 to 62.
which is also because the French were getting kicked out of Vietnam around that time too. Uh, I guess they were having to retreat worldwide.
Apparently, they also had a crisis in the 90s. I do not remember this. There were political demonstrations until 93. In 91, a political entity dominated by religious conservatives called the Islamic Salvation Front engaged in a political test of wills with authorities. In the 92 elections for the Algerian National Assembly, the Islamists garnered a large amount of support in the first round. Fearing an eventual win by the Islamists, the army canceled the election process, setting off a civil war. I don't even remember this civil war in
I
Algeria.
think
Do you remember this?
just vaguely. The main thing that I remember when I think of Algerian history, the main thing I know was that was like one of those really scarring. I mean, we're not, obviously not very aware of it here, but for the Algerians and the French that were there, it was really
Yeah, but
ugly. I
it
feel like
looks
I
like it looks like it was relatively quiet after their independence, and
and you
then
said their
they
independence was in 80, or when was their independence?
62. Well, here's another coinky dink. July 5th, 1962. You can't make this stuff up.
Uh
I mean, it's off by a day, but still, that's a little weird. And
well, actually, let me just ask because I'm having trouble locking on July 5th, 1962. Why is that a weird date? The Steel Day or something? Or
oh no, because America's independence is July 4th.
oh, okay,
They're
okay,
one day off on July. So there's 365 days a year. So out of all the days,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's not as big of a coincidence as July 4th, but it's almost there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also, I feel like we should train ourselves to always kind of look, just, just to ask
Oh,
the question. Because,
I always do. Apparently, in 88, 1 year before the fall of the Berlin Wall, shout out to David Hasselhoff, the man, the myth, the legend that actually brought down
David
the wall.
Hasselhoff.
If you haven't seen his performance,
So is he, because I saw you had a podcast on Hasselhoff and I have to choose. So I haven't seen that one yet.
oh,
I mean, I am
oh,
aware
this
of
is
what, I
blasphemy.
pretty
You
much
call
love
yourself a
him.
Mindshock fan and you haven't seen the David Hasselhoff podcast?
Oh, I know, for shame.
This
Uh,
is the most prolific human being that has possibly ever existed in any industry.
well, so I've known some German folks and it really blew me away. What a He's so popular there, and for his music, not for his lifeguarding skills.
Well, let me just say this. The Berlin Wall did not come down until he sang Looking for Freedom on site. I will say that. I will say that.
Wow, that is how. So he's a revolutionary, taking walls
It is.
down.
I mean, though, you call it how you want, but until he sang his song, the wall did not come down.
The hats.
He will
That's
always be a part of history for that alone. I mean, obviously for Knight Rider, Baywatch, and Baywatch Nights. Everybody sleeps on Baywatch Nights. I can't believe that hasn't had a Blu-ray release yet.
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, people think it was unrealistic for Mitch Buchanan to be a lifeguard during the day and a PI at night. But think about this. In real life, he was shooting both shows simultaneously while doing music tours and releasing new albums all over the world.
Do you think there's anything suspicious about Hasselhoff as far as
Well, you'll
potential
have to check
agents?
out the podcast. Maybe you should be on Hasselhoff Part 2.
Okay, and I've got to see the Hasselhoff. It's just everything is getting so weird.
Come on, you have no
I'm half
excuse.
joking.
You have no excuse. I only have 4,500 podcasts on the Mindcheck channel. It's not like I have millions. It's only
Yeah,
4,500.
maybe very interesting, and also multiple hours too. For an
Yeah, I
individual
mean, some of them
podcast.
might be 20 hours long, but I mean, it's not that. It's not like
Yeah,
they're weeks long.
yeah, no, a
You
couple
can find the
lifetimes here.
time. You can find the time. All
But
right, so
also,
let's deal with.
well, let me get one question, if I may, on Hasselhoff. Just in this strange era, you know, I'm opening up to more and more possibilities. Do you think Hasselhoff? Well, you're saying I have to watch podcasts, but thinking of like a Chuck Barris type of guy, or one of these, who, again, I don't know that he was an agent or anything either, but I just, it's hilarious. I've never thought of David Hasselhoff as being a meaningful
He's
person in global
revolutionary in every
politics. Yeah,
sense. In
bring
every
walls
sense
down.
of the word.
All right, well, I'll get back to you on
And now
Hasselhoff.
that we're talking here, we're gonna have to examine his tie. He has to have ties to NASA. He has ties to everything else. So,
Yeah, surely he's been to space or the moon.
okay. So In Algiers, apparently a year before the Berlin Wall, there were demonstrations known as the Spring of Algiers. 300 people died. And then in 89, there was a new constitution. So they probably have Hasselhoff to thank as well, because that was the wall coming down.
Yeah, he probably did a little
Yeah.
jaunt over there and to stir things up too.
So apparently it was relatively quiet from 62 to 88. And then in the 90s, there's another decade of political unrest. And then in December 11th, 2007, 2 car bombs exploded in Algiers. One bomb targeted 2 UN office buildings, and the other targeted a government building housing the Supreme Court. The death toll was at least 62, with over 200 injured. Wow. As of 2008, that was 2007. As of 2008, it is speculated that the attack was carried out by the Al-Qaeda cell within the city. Indigenous terrorist groups have been actively operating in Algeria since around 2002. But, okay. Yeah, I was just looking at the exact equipment they used. They used a Hasselblad 500 EL data camera. The Apollo 11 Hasselblad camera. I mean, obviously, film actually, when converted to digital, film is closer to 4K scans. But
especially the Hasselblad, I think.
What was that?
Hasselblad.
Yeah,
well, I think especially Hasselblad is a large format. What's that?
Yeah, it was actually, so the film was a double perforated 70 millimeter film. So that's around IMAX. IMAX standard is 70 millimeter.
So, one question that I've had lingering through this whole podcast is the broadcast from the moon at the time, late 60s, early 70s, that was in high def? Or supposedly?
I don't know, because I don't know what they used for the scan, because I'm assuming it wasn't, but the data was there. It just so it didn't broadcast all of it, because who could be watching in high def? Then again,
right?
Mission Control had that giant screen though, which was obviously way better quality than a little TV. So yeah. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's kind of hard to find information other than the list of equipment used.
Well, also, are you saying that we see until I started looking into this just somewhat recently, but to me, the first clue that we have some kind of government hijinks going on, is when like 7,000 documents, everything associated with the moon landing just disappears into some government.
Hold on. Let's try to focus on the broadcast here. So apparently it was a 2.5 hour continuous feed. High def or not, I mean, for that feed to not even be interrupted, I mean, this is wild. I mean, think about it. A news crew, I mean, I don't know about today, so maybe post 2010 they can do it wirelessly, but pre-2000, so all throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, you need an entire van with a huge dish to try all the, like, think about the amount of cables they'd run even on a regular street to broadcast live. And there's still a delay on that. Think about that. Yeah, it's not instant to the second, whereas according to the raw footage, if any Mindshock listeners haven't checked out the Apollo missions podcast series on Mindshock, I actually play a pretty extensive section of what is alleged to be the raw feed, meaning nothing is edited. There are some responses going back and forth with less than 2 seconds of delay. Think about that. So unless they're lying about that, I mean, the delay itself is pretty smoking gun evidence, because on the non-raw feed, you can say, oh, they edited it for those long minutes and minutes of pauses. But on their own alleged raw feed, there are sometimes the delay is almost it's shorter than a delay from a news crew broadcasting here on Earth on the street to a TV station that's literally a block away, because that still
Yeah,
has a couple seconds of delay.
yeah, and a block away with there's actually a news place fairly close to where I live with several massive satellites out there for broadcasting. Not like a little flimsy shoebox
Yeah,
size. You know.
apparently. So you know what's kind of weird though? So because I'm looking at the National Museum. Believe it or not, Scotland has a pretty good write up on it. So apparently, that's why Scottish innovator John Logie Baird developed a small, robust television camera that enabled the live broadcast from this mission. So the camera was
Oh,
developed in 28. So supposedly, I mean, think about it. So okay, this
wait.
is what
I just you said the camera was you said it was developed in 28. Did you mean 68 or
1928.
oh,
So that's
1928?
so that's the robust camera. So it doesn't say here. It doesn't say how they fed the high def through that camera. I mean, you would think it would say how they did that. So apparently it was 10 times a second to scan images. It was a low res broadcast. But it also says that three separate broadcast transmissions were recombined at mission control to get a color image. So this makes it even worse. Not so they didn't have one stream. They had three separate simultaneous streams, somehow all flawlessly not interrupted, that produced a color image, and then that image was converted to an electric signal, which was beamed to televisions around the world. Okay,
So just
so
to recap, to make sure I understand that. So I mean, obviously there's so many gaps in the story, but
there is.
so because they have these low res cameras, they're broadcasting three separate
Well,
streams
hold on a
from the
second.
moon.
Hold on a second. The
I'm
transmission was supposedly low res. So they're using the Hasselblad cameras to get high def video footage.
See, I
So,
always think of Hasselblad as being for photography, not for film.
oh no, no,
But
no.
they must have
They
film
made
too.
film cam. They actually have some of the best cameras. They're amazing.
Well, I know they're great. I know they're great, like film cameras or photo cameras, but yeah, I didn't realize they did video and stuff too. But
Well,
okay,
get this. So, actually, this doesn't make any sense. There's three different stories here. Because it also says that Neil Armstrong's first steps on the moon were beamed back from a low res black and white television camera. The camera remains on the moon where Armstrong left it. Okay.
um,
So
huh.
there's apparently there's four different cameras here.
Oh,
So
okay. So one black and white camera got left behind, and then three other cameras, and then so they're broadcasting the stuff in real time to Houston, where they are stitching together the three separate broadcasts almost
that's actually not
instantaneously.
so for anybody that remembers old TVs and that's why there's different colors. There's the yellow cable, the red cable. Like there were different cables for each color, and you plug them all in. Even the first
Yeah,
DVD players have that. Like before the HDMI cables came out.
yeah.
So
I,
that's not unusual. What I'm saying is, what are the chances they all transmitted perfectly? Each separate transmission was flawless.
well, that's what I mean. And if I'm understanding you, and exactly getting three separate streams. I mean, first of all, the whole thing is kind of ridiculous on its premise in certain ways, but to put three streams together in live time for the entire world to see
Well,
that's
where they broadcast it from Mission Control to the TV station, I don't have a problem with that. Obviously, they can broadcast anything from Mission Control to a TV station. My
Well, no, I
issue
guess
is
perhaps I'm misunderstanding, but it just seemed like you were also saying that it's not just putting one stream though. They're also having to do a little value added at Mission Control, aren't they, to combine
yes. So
three
the
streams into
streams,
one?
so there's a minimum of three streams, possibly four or five, but there's a minimum of three allegedly coming from the moon to Mission Control where they're live combined to form a color image. And then from there, they're broadcast out. Now,
Seamlessly to the world.
supposedly the live broadcast was only color, was not color initially. So the replays were color, but the first stream was, but that's all besides the point. Because what camera are they using for their high def videos? Because if they're using the Hasselblad, and then they also have these other cameras, and then they developed their own prototype television camera, the Mark V, which was a sequential color television camera prototype. So they basically had to develop their own camera. It doesn't specifically say why. I'm guessing because it was the sequential color television system in order to be able to transmit back in color. But apparently, they also shot high def video, which is what is in the NASA archive. That's why you can go, it wasn't AI. They released the high def, I don't know, 20 years ago. I mean, it was quite a number of years ago where they released the high def footage from the moon. So maybe the high def footage wasn't broadcast. I don't know. I don't know.
Because since they lost so much of the original materials.
Well, what they lost was the telemetry reels. I don't know if they claim to have lost just the regular video, because the regular video, if it's faked, it doesn't matter. The telemetry data is what you want to see if they were really going to the moon.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it just, the idea that they would lose anything associated with that project, if we were really, if it was really being done, is inconceivable.
In staying consistent with exhaustive Mindshock fashion, let's go back to Algiers for a second, because I'm still trying to figure out why television engineers are having their conference in Algiers when premiering this high definition technology, because it's apparently this not peaceful area, although I guess in the 80s it was peaceful enough. But
it seems like it seems like a bizarre choice as a place for television engineers, and especially in 1981. So I mean, you're getting into like Sadat's about to get assassinated. I mean, it's not
the first major sporting event was the Mediterranean Games, which was held there in 75. And then the All Africa Games in 78, and then the African Handball Nations Championship in 89. Handball was no joke in the 80s. I don't know if you play handball, but handball was that was no joke in 89.
I've always been a big racquetball guy more, and both of those sports, racquetball and handball, I think took off in that time. So no, Algeria, well, if they had the handball championship in 89, it definitely speaks to them being on the map, I guess, a little more.
Well, the African handball champ, not the world.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah. But yeah, no, it is weird. It's just weird, man. So they have this see, if they were still under French connection, that would make sense, because France and Paris and a few other cities, I mean, that's a known business destination. I mean, French, for those that don't know, at least in the past, English is considered the language of the world, but French was actually considered the business language. Like all the years ago when I was in school, after American, French was considered the international language of business.
Well, yeah, I mean, French lingua franca. I mean, it was the international language, and then kind of English usurped.
Yeah. So France
that
wouldn't
position,
have been.
I think.
So if it
but a bunch
was,
of those African
yeah.
countries.
I mean,
Oh,
I
go
don't
ahead.
know, unless there were just that many French diplomats pulling strings to get this TV tech conference. But
Well, I mean,
apparently,
even the association with France, though, it still seems weird.
because of the
I
bloody
mean, because
war, yeah,
what's that?
because of the bloody war, yeah,
Yeah. I don't think. I mean, France is maybe still. I mean, because they still are meddling in these places, even though they're supposed to be kicked out. But
yeah.
I don't think they would. Even if there's a connection, I don't think they would do hold a conference like that in Algiers. I mean, that would be. They would hold it in France, I would think. If they had anything.
Yeah, yeah. So
You know.
that was 81. And then nothing happened until 83, where Japan presented, I actually didn't know this. They presented a high definition analog television system, literally HDTV, was presented at a Swiss conference in 1983.
Huh.
83. That's wild.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the NHK system was standardized in the US as the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers Standard 240M in the early 90s, but abandoned later on when it was replaced by DVB analog standard. High vision video is still usable for HDTV video interchange, but there is almost no modern equipment available to perform this function. Attempts at implementing high vision as a 6 megahertz broadcast channel were mostly unsuccessful. All attempts at using this format for terrestrial TV transmission, that's an interesting phrase, isn't it?
Yes, isn't it?
Were abandoned by the mid 90s. So they couldn't get it to work.
They could get it
Europe,
work on Earth.
yeah,
They should have
Europe.
flown up to the moon again. It's easier than all this
Well,
fakery,
where's it? I'm guessing there was a conspiracy in Algiers that suppressed this technology.
Interesting.
And I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if David Hasselhoff would be involved. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, no, that seems up his in his bailiwick.
Europe developed HDMAC, which is 1,250 lines, 50 hertz, a member of the MAC family of hybrid analog digital video standards. However, it never took off as a terrestrial video transmission format. HDMAC was never designated for video interchange except by the European Broadcasting Union. Digital high def was not possible with uncompressed video due to impractically high memory and bandwidth requirements, with a bit rate exceeding 1 gigabyte a second for full HD video. Digital HDTV was enabled by the development of discrete cosine transform video compression, DCT, a lossy compression technique that was first proposed by Nasir Ahmed in 72. Okay, if this guy's from Algeria.
I was just gonna say that too.
Okay, well,
That perhaps
apparently,
explains it.
hold on. Apparently, he's not.
Uh,
So he was born in Bangalore, India. He's an Indian American electrical engineer and computer scientist. And he's professor at the University of New Mexico. So he has nothing to do with Algeria.
okay.
He might have never even been
he was
to
the head of
Algeria, unless it was for that conference. But
that guy Ahmed. He invented something in 72. Is that what you said?
Nasir Ahmed was the engineer who first proposed DCT video compression. So this was later adapted into a motion compensated DCT algorithm for video coding standards such as H.26x formats from 1988 onwards, and the MPEG formats from 93 onwards. Motion compensated DCT compression significantly reduced the amount of memory and bandwidth required for digital video, capable of achieving a data compression ratio of about 100:1 compared to uncompressed video. By the early 90s, DCT video compression had been widely adopted as the video coding standard for HDTV. The current high-def video standards in North America were developed during the course of the advanced television process initiated by the Federal Communications Commission in 1987 at the request of American broadcasters. In essence, the end of the 80s was a death knell for most analog high def technology that developed at that time. The FCC process led by the Advanced Television Systems Committee. And that's the other thing, too. Like, how many different committees are there? I mean,
Yeah. And
there's
actually, it seems
actually
like
an
some of this
advanced,
also.
so there's all
Oh,
these different television committees, and there's also an Advanced Television Systems Committee.
yeah, yeah. No, that seems excessive. It
So,
also seems. I mean, again, I'm not expert. I'm just speaking whatever comes to mind. But it seems like in that transition to the high def, there's always an economic component too, where they try and force everyone
yeah.
into the new tech, um, which seems like that they've been based on deciding certain standards. And it seems like I remember there was a point where I had to give up on the older TV that I had because in fact, yeah, there was a moment, wasn't there, when high def, it's like if you don't have you won't be able to receive anything if you don't have a high def TV or something to that
Yeah, I
effect.
think didn't they roll that back many, many times?
Yeah, they kept trying to force it, I think, and then finally did, I think, somewhere in the aughts, I think. But
Oh
uh,
wow. Here's a mind shock. Hold
I'm
on a
ready.
second. I'm about to have my, is this a Mandela effect? Because I was generally familiar with a lot of this, and I do not remember this ever being anywhere. So apparently, the BBC began the world's first regular high def television service November 2nd, 1936. 36. But wait a second.
Whoa.
Wait. No, it wasn't really high def though. So,
Okay.
okay. So it was 240 lines, and they also had a 405 line broadcast and did not like the new medium term high def. Okay, yeah. That meant something else in 36. It was defined as a minimum of 240 lines, where today it's 1080.
Okay.
So, yeah, no. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Quick
Okay.
aside, just the uh, you mentioned something that I wouldn't mind discussing at some future point, but that Mandela effect, that's one of those I'm not versed in it. When I first heard about that from someone telling me all of a sudden, oh, it's the Mandela effect, and I asked what, and I wouldn't mind understanding it better because it seems really like
Yeah,
distracting.
I've been working on an entire series for literally years now because I wanted to make it comprehensive.
Okay.
We should definitely save that because I want to go over all this stuff. The first HDTV broadcast was January 1st, 2004.
Okay.
So,
That sounds
yeah, just for reference. And you know what's kind of weird though? Even like I'm trying to look up how exactly the broadcast was done during the Apollo missions, and it's very telling that they don't say exactly. They say there were three different streams. I mean, they don't talk about the bandwidth. Like I'm trying to find that information.
well, and especially at that level of government institution. I mean, if they weren't actually broadcasting, they may have not bothered to fill in all of those details. Just said it was three streams, and
Okay,
uh,
here we go. This is pretty much the best I think I'm gonna find here. Science Media Museum. So you're not gonna believe it. Oh wow, this is wild. Okay. So apparently they used wow, I can't believe this. So okay, I'll read through this. So Apollo 10 technically broadcasted live color TV transmissions from space. So they could apparently they didn't do it for Apollo 11, but somehow they did it for Apollo 10. So they did an orbit around the moon and apparently transmitted live
because
color.
Apollo 11's the one that the script had it with the mess up,
No,
right? And
that
then
was
they go,
13. That was 13.
oh,
Apollo
that's
11
13.
was the first man landing on the moon.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because then you
Yeah.
said Apollo 10, and I was like,
Apollo
wait, that,
10 was just an orbit. It was a manned, it was the fourth human manned space flight, but it was the second orbit of the moon, but they didn't land on the moon. They just
okay,
orbited it allegedly.
allegedly, yeah.
Yeah. So it was only 2 months later that they did the Apollo 11 mission.
Okay.
So apparently, somehow they were able to broadcast live color TV transmission.
Live color TV on Apollo 10,
Right.
but not on Apollo 11.
Correct.
Yeah, that's sort of peculiar.
So for Apollo, well, if they were trying to get higher quality, perhaps that's why they did allegedly they did the three different transmissions to blend the color. So technically, it was color. It just wasn't a single color.
Oh, okay. Or they might have done that red, red, yellow, whatever the
Yeah,
the primary colors to combine them. Maybe they had one stream of each,
I'm
you
trying to
know.
find videos of the Apollo 10 footage just to compare. Did Austin go over that on his stream?
No, I don't recall hearing. In fact, Apollo 10, the thing that I've been aware of for years, although now I feel like it's even that much more of a tragedy. I still remember their names actually, Grissom, White, and Chaffee. I remember learning them in
Yeah,
school, but they that's the thing I remember prior to 11 because it was not long before Apollo 11 when Grissom was saying we're not going to the moon, this thing's not going anywhere,
yeah.
right? And then I mean everything again. I want to keep my mind shock. I want to stay vigilant on the
Yeah,
logic, but I mean
it's
it
just
was
it's a couple seconds of the Earth that they're broadcasting. Supposedly the first live. I mean, it looks like a cartoon to me, but yeah,
huh.
this is weird. So what was the alleged first photo of the Earth from space? So this was alleged. So the blue marble is supposedly December 7th, 1972. So why
Oh, so it
is
was like a ladder flight. I figured the Blue
right?
Marble was from '69, but
No, 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 no. That's from 72. And Apollo 10 launched May 18th, 69. So it was
huh.
only 2 months. So why? So, and in this footage, okay, so apparently the bottom of the earth from, I don't know if this is cropped, a little bit of it isn't seen, but it's pretty much the entire earth in a live color broadcast. And I mean, maybe the reason they don't use it as evidence is because it just doesn't look real. I
Because
mean,
it does not, because this is supposed to be '68 Apollo 10. It doesn't have the look of the Blue Marble of
it's
'72 or
it's 69 and it's 2 months before Apollo 11, but it
yes.
it's just a little blurrier, but the weird thing is that it's like the cloud formations are frozen, which is weird to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm looking right on the NASA's YouTube channel. So I'm looking at NASA's footage directly from NASA.
Huh.
And yeah, it's wild. So okay,
Yeah,
let's
I'm
go
wondering
back
if
to this.
Apollo 10 maybe was using some of the Chinese equipment
No, it still looks
in a
better than
stealth.
theirs. But
Well, just thinking because that the Chinese Earth is
all
that
right,
I've
hold
seen
on.
is
Let's go through
okay.
this
So
alleged transmission.
all right, all right.
So there was intense debate within NASA about whether a television camera should be carried in Apollo 11's lunar module as it would add weight to the spacecraft. Eventually, a black and white Westinghouse camera with a 16 millimeter lens was approved. Deployment of a TV camera to transmit signals to Earth became one of the additional flight objectives. And I don't know why they're not talking about the Hasselblad cameras because where they filmed high def video film. So how many cameras did they have? Three, four, and they did all this different filming. I mean, maybe, but it's just a little weird. So
Well, it is
operate.
weird because I also get an image when you say that, remembering what these television news cameras and stuff were in that era. It's kind of like talking about the mainframe computers. I mean, they were so big and bulky. Now, obviously, they're going to be reduced size for them, but um,
Okay,
I don't. So
I
I'm not an
just sent.
expert on the moon, like seeing all the pictures or going through all of the footage. But I don't recall seeing cameras. I feel like what I recall seeing is little Hasselblad photo cameras on their chests, which would be very hard to take pictures with, probably in one of those big suits. But I don't really. I mean, am I missing something, or I don't really remember
There's there's
video
footage of
cameras that much.
various cameras. I just sent you a link. So check out the link I just sent you. I want your opinion on if you can open that. It says operating the lunar camera. Do you see that the so-called antenna?
Yes,
Testing the moon television antenna. Do you believe that little umbrella can go from the moon to Earth with
you
no
mean can
delay?
broadcast from the moon to Earth?
Yeah.
No, no.
Well, not to mention,
Um,
where are all the cables? Like, they's got like a tiny little transmission cable, but that's it. How is that enough? I mean, look at a TV news crew with their van and their dozens and dozens of feet of cable.
yeah, and heavy.
Yeah,
Like also
yeah.
their dish is not like that. Looks like a little toothpick. Uh,
So, yeah, it says here
Again,
Neil
it's like from a
Armstrong,
Chinese drink. It's one of those little umbrellas they put in a Chinese drink.
as Neil Armstrong eased himself onto the porch of the lunar module, he opened up a storage assembly attached to the lander's lower stage. Contained within it, surrounded by gold-colored installation blankets, was the black and white Westinghouse television camera. To ensure it was able to record images of the mission, the small camera was specially equipped to deal with the high contrast between light and shade on the moon. Now, here we're going to have another huge problem because if the moon's surface really is so incredibly bright, how did they? I mean, how would they have even been able to get anything? Because I mean, you can do this experiment with, let's say, like a light that you can stand on, like a floor, a lit floor, like an expensive dance floor with a lit surface. Once you adjust the exposure for the extreme brightness, you're not going to be able to see anything else.
Just the
So,
floor.
yeah, if you adjust the contrast to the surface of the moon, you're not going to be able to see anything else. So
Well,
it's
so
weird.
interesting question, if I might ask, because I'm kind of freshly catching up on these things. It almost sounds like what you're making an argument, the lack of stars in the pictures and stuff like that because of the aperture and having to crank it down.
Well,
Um,
even you
it
wouldn't be
sounds like
able
you're
to.
justifying them not having stars a little bit. Am I
Right, but you also wouldn't be able to see the lander or the flag or
right?
anything.
Just just
Yeah,
just the brightness of the ground.
right.
Okay.
Because if you even that out, I mean, I'm not 100% sure about the astronaut suits because they're white, so they would be reflecting hard. But they're definitely not as bright as the surface of the moon if we're to believe the story about it reflecting sunlight. But as far as the flag or literally anything else, you wouldn't be able to see anything. So it says here the image and sound signals were
I
transmitted.
missed the beginning of that because you were muted. I missed the first
Oh,
half of that. So please
all
start
I
again.
said was the image and sound signals were transmitted via a lightweight antenna on top of the lander. The umbrella like antenna was lined with 38 miles of fine gold plated wire, thinner than human hair, to reflect the signal 250,000 miles back to Earth. In the cabin, Buzz Aldrin closed a circuit breaker, and black and white TV pictures of Armstrong's ghostly form were beamed back to Earth. The images were grainy and indistinct, but they represented a stunning breakthrough in broadcasting. Now, if you look at the video here, does that look like 38 miles? I mean, maybe it is. It doesn't look like 38 miles to me, but even if it is, look at how tiny that transmitter is.
Yeah, let's see where
It's in the video. If you just without clicking on the video, just right underneath the umbrella.
see, I was down looking at that TV.
It says restored Apollo 11 moonwalk, testing operating the lunar camera, testing the moon television antenna. Right under the picture of the antenna, there's a YouTube window. And it says restored Apollo 11 moonwalk.
Okay, there it is. Yes.
Don't click on the video, but just look at the you see the transmitter there.
Yeah, you mean the one that's just to the right of the astronaut?
So yes.
Or no, it's just past. Isn't it that little white thing that's
so
like
it's
north?
Both of them, and not only are they not connected to each other, and then I believe there's another one on the lander itself. You see that antenna?
On the lander itself, yes, kind of up near the top.
Yeah. So we have 3 of these, and none of them are connected by wires.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be some pretty advanced tech, I think. I mean, even for NASA at that time.
And they're pointing the wrong way. So the Earth is in the other direction.
Trying to figure that out because based on the shadows.
Yes, supposedly the Earth is the other direction.
Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah. So it's pointing the wrong way as well,
But you see, also in regards to the camera, like whatever camera is filming this, you see how you can still make out the detail of all of the non-white components of the lander.
Yeah.
And the flag. If you adjusted the exposure for an incredibly bright surface, you wouldn't be able to see any of that.
Yeah. That would just be, if anything, it would be
yeah, it would just not be there. Yeah.
Yeah, just super bright.
Well, you wouldn't blurry, wouldn't see it at all, like the just stars. Zero. Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, these little diagrams seem like a better explanation than the actual video and photos we have. You see the sketches of lunar surface activity.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Looks like think about it the other way. Look at like SETI or something where it's not just one satellite, it's an entire gigantic dish array in order to get the signal out. And their signals are little. What's transmitted from SETI are just really, really, I mean, I can find the first transmissions of SETI. I believe it was just basic audio. And I think later they started TV transmissions, but look at the size of the SETI array.
Yeah, it's like
and this
global,
tiny
right?
little dip, and this tiny little rinky dink.
Yeah. Well, it's good that he's sweeping it up, make sure that the moon floor is clean before you
set it sample up collection. Yeah. So after successfully landing on the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were supposed to sleep for a few hours. They couldn't wait and requested to exit the lunar module ahead of schedule. This change of plans meant that the Honeysuckle Creek tracking station in Australia was in the perfect position to relay the first few minutes of transmission. Goldstone Observatory in California was also receiving the signal, but the picture was grainy and hard to make out. So wait a second. So they're sending the signal just wherever, and anybody can pick it up. And then they're also sending the 3 different color streams to mission control, if I'm understanding this correctly.
Well, I'm definitely a little baffled, but because are they sending the 3 transmissions to Honeysuckle Creek?
So no. they're basically just sent from that tiny little umbrella. It looks like they're sending everywhere. And so
And those
Australia and California were the first to pick up the transmission.
okay.
And then it
Okay. So they're
says
sending
here,
anyone could pick it up then.
well, supposedly the low res, this is the low res black and white. I'm assuming it doesn't say that though. So the highest quality was supposedly sent to mission control in 3 different transmissions. But
Okay.
I suppose anybody with the equipment might have been able to pick those up also. I don't know. So I wonder if they had a Wi-Fi password.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding.
So
Also, wait, I'm just Parkes radio telescope dish in Australia also began transmitting once it was able to have line of sight contact with Apollo 11.
yeah,
Um,
but even though it was pointing away from Earth. But anyway, so hold on
yeah.
a second. Let
Okay.
me finish reading this. The pictures were uploaded to Earth orbiting satellites, then transmitted back to NASA at Houston and via
Oh,
further satellite links to receiving centers around the world. Is it just me or is this a little complicated?
yeah. Well, um, but it's easier than faking it, of course. Uh, but yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. It is complicated, and also with, I mean, the satellite situation in 1969. I mean, the idea of, I mean, it's like nothing even remotely like now, and so for Houston to have to send back to the satellites and then back to Earth around the whole globe, that seems borderline not
But there's
possible at that time. But
well,
yeah,
there's 3 different stories here that they're peddling at the same time. That Australia and California picked up the transmission. Then NASA, wait a second. It says here Goldstone Observatory in California was also receiving the signal, but the picture was grainy and hard to make out. At the last second, NASA switched from Goldstone to Honeysuckle for the world broadcast. So what does that mean? So NASA is getting their signal from Goldstone and Honeysuckle, and why is Australia? So does Australia have that great equipment that it's much better than the equipment in the US?
yeah, I don't know. It seemed like it was trying to credit Honeysuckle Creek tracking station. I mean, it's saying up above that it was in the perfect position to
Yeah.
relay. I mean, it sounds so cobbled together from just,
And then, but also separate from all that, it's also transmitting to alleged satellites and then from the satellites to NASA and then other satellite links to TV centers. So there's what, 3 different transmissions?
oh, you
Hold
mean
on
to
a
the
second.
satellite and back?
Let me look at satellite television because when did satellite television start? So satellite television launched in 1980. Oh, wait, that's the television channel. So the technology itself, let's see here.
Actually, I think I could throw something in here. I mean, like, I think that any of us who are a little bit older can recall, cable, that succession as Hollywood and media invaded our homes more and more. Cable TV was very exciting. That had no satellite aspect, though. I mean, unless I'm off topic, I mean, satellite TV didn't kick in until like 1990 or something like that. I mean, everything was still wire based, wasn't it?
The
I mean, just like
first
phones.
the first public satellite television signals from Europe to North America were relayed via the Telstar satellite over the Atlantic Ocean on July 23rd, 1962.
Okay,
But that's
but
still kind of weird. So
I mean,
between six,
that would have been a rare thing, though. I mean, it wasn't like
it said
now.
it was watched by 100 million people.
The thing in 1962 or the moon?
Yep, the
Oh,
1962.
but that wasn't something they were doing all the time, was it? I mean, using satellites for
Hold
broadcasting.
on. let's there were 650 million estimated watched the moon landing on TV. So 100 million watched the July 23rd public satellite television signals. Launched in 1962, the Relay 1 satellite was the first satellite to transmit television signals from the US to Japan. So are we to believe that the very first satellite transmissions occurred in 62 and 63, not even around the whole world, just from one continent to another? And a mere 7 years later, they can do it from the moon live.
Yeah.
So the first commercial communication satellite, the Intelsat 1, nicknamed Early Bird, was launched into geosynchronous orbit April 6th, 65. The first national network of television satellites called Orbita was created by the Soviet Union in October 67. So this was using the Molniya satellite for rebroadcasting and delivering television signals to ground downlink stations. Here's the other thing, too. If these signals are going through the satellite, then to the satellite uplink stations, then transmitted to everybody's television, how is there almost no delay?
Right. No, that's what I've been thinking with all this bouncing back and forth between Houston and then, this suddenly elaborate satellite system.
So the official television satellite industry started in 1976.
Okay.
So maybe they weren't broadcasting all the time, I guess. And then 1980 is when they actually started satellite channels.
Yeah, see, that sounds about right to me. I mean, that's why I'm just wondering. And again, I'm just flying by the seat of my pants. I mean, I don't really know all this stuff, but the 62, it just seems like that would have been an experimental broadcast. But what I mean, Sputnik supposedly is like 1957 or something, right? I mean, the idea that we had sufficient satellites to broadcast, like to all, to 600 million people all around the globe, that just sounds a little suspicious to me. I mean,
yeah,
having like one or two satellites to do a targeted experiment, but
actually, yeah. Okay, the fact that they have three different stories actually isn't as suspicious, because if this was real, if one of them failed, it would be nice to have a backup. So that actually isn't that crazy. So it gets even crazier. So supposedly images were also transmitted via microwaves to London. I never even saw anything about microwave transmit. So they basically, allegedly, did all these different types of transmissions. It was also an all-night British broadcast, and it was broadcast continually for 11 hours, July 19th to 20th, 1969. And this coverage wasn't the moon landing alone. It was including, at the Apollo 11 studio, they had special guests. There were even people reading poetry about the moon. It would be wild. Oh, Pink Floyd produced the song Moonhead just for this broadcast.
Oh, really?
This is insane, man. This is some kind of ritual, isn't it? I mean, this is wild.
Yeah, no, totally. Again, I feel like there's ample reasons to suspect the moon landings that are really solid. But I wanted to get to the microwave thing, because didn't you just say that they were broadcasting also via microwave?
Yes, to London. So apparently,
that sounds. See, the use of microwaves was that and don't first of all, was that advanced to such a point to be able to use that in that way for information broadcasting? But I also thought microwaves were more difficult. Like again, one of the funny things in the present is that it seems like we landed on the moon without even knowing how far the moon was exactly from the Earth.
Well,
But
the microwave transmission supposedly can be done wirelessly, but yeah, I
oh,
don't know.
in '69, uh,
Well, just the technology itself, yes. I
I
don't
mean,
know. You would still need the other issue is the interference with the other transmissions because if they're if they're transmitting right microwave with all these other transmissions, that would supposedly cause interference.
yeah. Well, that's actually partly why I was even thinking of the microwave thing because I just saw something elsewhere. Uh, it seems like issues of interference or also that microwaves can be blocked more easily, I think, can't they? So uh, as an experimental broadcast from the moon in 1969, it doesn't. Perhaps I'm wrong, but at first blush, it seems like
Okay, I found a better link actually. So this is the National Radio Astronomy Observatory. So this will be the last link we go over. So to
wait,
try
and
to make heads or tails.
that's in New Mexico, is it not?
Is it
The Very Large Array is in New Mexico, I think.
the
I've been to that.
NRAO?
Or is that there's one in South America too that they link up.
Well, the headquarters of the website is in Virginia, but I'm not sure if that's where the actual.
Well, there's in New Mexico, sort of near Socorro, uh, there's a very large array they call it that is radio astronomy thing, and that they have a whole bunch of satellites. It's uh, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's get to this one.
Yeah, it might. Yeah, there's. Okay, so are you looking at the link? So how
Oh, did
alive?
you give it to me on Patreon?
Yeah,
Okay, let me. No, I haven't gotten it yet.
how a live TV signal was sent from the moon to Earth. So it says here that there's three slow scans. Now, what's kind of unclear, are they sending it back up to the satellite and then retransmitting it again? It's a little
Well,
weird here. It says here that the famous video of
oh,
Apollo 11 began as a faint high frequency transmission from the lunar lander. By the time the signal reached Earth, it was too weak to be detected by common radios and televisions. It took radio astronomers with sensitive antenna dishes to capture the signal. The Apollo mission was a tremendous feat of engineering. It was a bold plan never attempted before or since.
um, so in summation yeah, this seems like a good site as far as getting a sense for it. So it was so weak coming off of the moon that then these satellite array setups were able to magnify
Here,
it, I guess.
here's what I don't get though. If you scroll down, you can see the CSIRO's Parkes radio telescope. Look at the size of that. So why would it not take something way bigger than that to transmit from the moon?
That's what I'm saying too. I mean, you know, I mean that's the kind of stuff that we receive information from space. I mean, you need that kind of a satellite, not the little compact
That's
shoebox
not
size.
connected to anything with wires in the first place.
Right, right. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is really weird. This is weird. I mean, that's a big ask. And here we are in 2024, and they can't even get any kind of broadcast.
Right, right. Well, that's the thing too. And yeah, exactly. I mean, if we went there, I mean, obviously, all of the explanations for our not returning, and I'm sure you've seen more than me, where I just can't even believe it that you see NASA employees seriously describing like losing technology or something. I mean, like saying stuff like that. that, kind of like we forgot how to do it, or do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, various spokesmen, it's like, no way. I mean, you can't, like, if you went to the moon, like that just makes no sense. Would you agree with that? Or,
Yeah,
I mean, with
right
some of
now
these people,
I'm also looking at the remote control shot of the moon that they got on what would it was this Apollo? It was a later mission where they panned the camera up. So
oh,
not
okay.
only so they had a remote, so they also had a remote control to control the camera remotely as they left the moon.
Oh, yeah, I think I heard something about that too. And I mean,
It
because
was the RCA GCTA motorized mount that filmed the lunar takeoff. It looks incredibly fake. I mean, all the footage. And that was, I believe that was the 72 mission, the last one. And
where they
they
left out,
remote controlled.
well, yeah, because that begs the question, doesn't it? I mean, remote control, in 1972, I mean, certainly on a civilian tech side, there wasn't much to speak of. Um, so they left it in 1972, and then are we still supposed to be able to remote control that camera that we left there? Or?
I don't know. I'm getting kind of exhausted trying to make heads or tails of this. Like
I feel it.
none of this really makes any sense because you would think that they would have a 4K live stream of this latest moon landing.
Yeah, I mean, what was I saw like sort of a sad little thing where it like had crashed on its side or something.
There
I just
was
saw a couple. Yeah,
the only thing for the new one, they had no video at all or even photos.
so that's totally inexcusable. I mean,
Yeah.
like, or how can they expect anyone to buy that?
They had some animations of what did they call it? Like whatever they call it, like a simulation, a video simulation of the landing. It wasn't the actual one. Like I'm watching it right now, and yeah, they was it's just a bunch of people celebrating.
Well, do you mind if I attempt to sort of it's a factoid around the moon, slightly crude humor? Uh, uh I'll take a stab at it. So when I first started to delve into this, the thing that got me going was that Dave McGowan. I've heard you mention him before.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the because he's got the serial killer. I forget the name of
Yes.
that book, but then there's a website and it's like Wag the Moondog or something.
Programmed to kill.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's the which
Yeah.
is excellent, I
Yeah.
think, well researched. But the he has a website that has his daughter's doing it since he died, but it's called Wag the Moondoggy or something. And he breaks down the stuff and it's quite funny actually. But uh, there is currently a plan, I think, to try and retrieve like Alan Shepard or one of those guys, I guess, took a crap on the moon, I think, and there is literally the intention of trying to retrieve that, or there's some place in
Wow.
California. You haven't heard this, have you? Or
No, no, I actually have not.
I wish I could remember it in more detail, so because it's hard to believe, like, but they've made some kind of thing about that like making that like we'll put a flag next to his crap or something, just it's almost humiliating, or it's just so weird that they would even try and you know I mean that's serious that they're excited, not just one step on the moon, but there's also someone took a shit there too. So maybe this thing, if it can get up, can get over there and retrieve that and put
I'm
it in the next
looking
shit back or something.
right now. I'm looking at the claims here. I'm on Northwestern University's website now on transmission delays for communication signals. They're claiming here, they're claiming that it could be 1 second from the Earth to the moon, 8.3 minutes from the Earth to the sun, which is allegedly 93 million miles. Can you believe that?
Um, yeah, no. Although I have to tell you, I was just trying to find some validating evidence on the bathroom on the moon thing. So can you please repeat that? The
Oh,
92,000. Yeah.
yeah, so the the DS1's communication system, the satellite, they're claiming, let's find out when the DS1 launched. I actually don't know. DS1 satellite launched 1998, October 24th, 98. But they're claiming that from this 98 satellite that wait a second. The signal has below is the lag times over the distance. So they're claiming that the lag time would only be 1 second to the Earth to the moon, 8.3 minutes to the sun, 93 million miles away.
Well, I
One,
mean,
yeah.
it was as far as you know, I've heard that statistic or that factoid that's always presented that if the sun's 93,000 miles or million miles away, you hear that all the time. Like if the sun were suddenly to be extinguished, that we wouldn't know for 8.5 minutes because of because it would take it's that many light minutes, I guess. So if they're broadcasting at the speed of light, I mean, according to all of their stuff, it would take 8.5 minutes, I think. Is that what you're saying?
I'm looking at radio signals. So I found a Reddit thread in amateur radio. They're talking about latency. So, for example, they brought up Stranger Things. Have you seen that?
I've seen the first. I think I've seen the first two seasons.
Yeah, you should watch all of them for Illuminati references. There's quite a bit, and it's all
Yeah,
based on
yeah.
MK. It's all based on MK Ultra anyway.
Right, right. No, I
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a scene where one of the kids actually sets up a mini radio tower to communicate with someone in a different state. So it's whatever, 2,000 kilometers. So the latency they're saying it would be 50 milliseconds. Hmm.
So wait, what would be 15 milliseconds?
50 milliseconds over 2,000 kilometers.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we'd have to calculate it, but I mean, I guess they're assuming it's traveling at speed of light.
I checked calculations on my video. I was just kind of wondering why. I mean, I guess, are they assuming since there's no air in space, allegedly, if there is space, that it
I
would,
can't wait to hit some of these topics too, because
yeah,
there's a lot.
yeah.
But
I mean, we got to wrap this up, so let's just do our final thoughts here. The transmissions are suspect to say the least. Let's put it that way.
very, very. I think that's a safe statement.
And I think the fact that they didn't even try this time around, when you would think they'd be able to do 4K high def, ultra high def resolution easily in the year 2024, and they didn't even try. I mean, it's
I
kind of
feel like
weird.
it almost indicates how strange this is getting. I mean, even to do it at all after all of these delayed missions and teasing about it for certainly last 20 years, we've been supposed to go
So,
back almost every
well,
year, right?
I went over that on have you seen my Matt Walsh breakdown?
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. By the
Yeah.
way, kudos.
Yeah. I
Yes,
went
I've seen it.
over, yeah, they were supposed to go back pretty much almost immediately. Not the rest of the 70s, although possibly 79, but throughout the 80s. And then they did the serious missions that they already got funded to the tune of billions of dollars all throughout the 90s. That's when they were actually supposed to set up the moon base by the end of the 90s.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So, given the fact that there's been nothing but teasing and the devouring of millions and billions of taxpayer dollars, the idea that they couldn't set up a camera for this alleged, and
Why
provide
didn't they
some
just put
evidence.
the same camera they had in 69 on it? Because they know
Yeah,
that worked.
exactly. Remote control that bad boy over and get some footage, and then you can sort of come full circle. Uh, Yeah, no, so it almost seems it's funny because I've been paying attention to other news, and then when I suddenly saw that, because I know Artemis had been delayed a few
Yeah.
months ago,
Yeah.
so it almost seemed like this came out of the blue, and it just seems more of that. Perhaps it's because of pressure on suspicion of the moon landing, but it's so obviously one of those hurried attempts to distract the public.
My question is,
yeah.
do people at Mission Control think it's real?
Well, so I have an interesting story about that I'm looking forward to. I talked with this one guy sort of infrequently, and the last time I spoke with him was before we've discussed many other topics, but I really hadn't dug into the moon yet, but he was suspicious. And his father apparently worked on, like, I think might have even been in mission control. And
Oh,
always,
wow.
yeah, I want to talk to him again about it because he said his father never would really talk about it.
Would you
Never
be,
really.
you think you could get him on the podcast?
I have to. He was like sort of traveling around. In fact, he was a professor as well that like got chased out because of diversity and in fact that's where I first started to hear about some of this equity and things like that, where
Yeah.
like that chased him out. He was teaching Colorado, I think, and so now
we're gonna have a pretty large stable of rogue professors on Mindshock.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, because I'll see what I can do, but I have to. I'm not. He comes by from time to time
Okay.
at my. But to finish what he told me though was that his father, he asked him once, like at the dinner table, because his father would never talk about it, never said anything about Armstrong or rah moon, and then so this guy asked his dad, did we go? And he said, well, you'd have to ask the astronauts that. Something to that effect. That was his response.
That is a weird response for sure.
Isn't it? I mean,
wow. Wow.
So yeah, it's almost like he knew but then again, it's that thing getting back to this. Is it Sinclair Lewis with that quote? I mean,
Upton Sinclair.
Yes, Upton Sinclair. I mean, to have to work in a setting like that, if you're suspicious and yet, you've got to have a paycheck and, yeah.
All right. Well, that is the final thought on the Mindshock podcast regarding the alleged return to the moon and our examination of the history of space transmissions. So we'll catch you guys next time. You want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Like and share. Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off.